I've always been a creature of habit. I like knowing what to expect, where I'm going, and who's around me. But tonight, as I trudge home after a late school trip that ended at 11:25 p.m., everything feels off. The usual gentle hum of the city at night is missing, replaced by an eerie stillness that sends shivers down my spine. The streetlights flicker weakly, casting long shadows that seem to dance menacingly around me. I pull my jacket closer, the chill of the night seeping into my bones. Each step I take resonates louder than usual, echoing through the empty streets like a drumbeat. As I round a corner, I spot a lone van parked haphazardly on the side of the road. It's an old, rusted thing, with peeling paint and darkened windows. My heart quickens its pace, and a sense of foreboding settles in the pit of my stomach. Something about the van seems off, out of place in this quiet neighborhood at this late hour. I try to convince myself that someone must have parked it there temporarily, maybe to unload some cargo or pick up a friend. But as I draw closer, I notice the eerie absence of any signs of life around the van. No voices, no footsteps, just an unsettling silence that hangs heavy in the air. A cold gust of wind picks up, swirling dry leaves around my feet. I hesitate, unsure if I should continue past the van or find an alternate route home. Just as I'm about to turn back, a shadow moves inside the van. I freeze, my breath catching in my throat. A figure emerges from the darkness within, tall and imposing. Before I can react, a hand shoots out, grabbing me by the arm with a vice-like grip. Adrenaline floods my veins, and I try to wriggle free, but the man's hold is too strong. Panic sets in, and I realize I'm being pulled towards the van, towards the unknown horrors that lurk within. The man's face is obscured by the shadows, but his intentions are clear. With a swift motion, he shoves me inside the van, slamming the door shut behind me. The smell of stale sweat and fear fills my nostrils, suffocating me as darkness envelops me completely. A wave of despair washes over me, but a flicker of defiance ignites within. I refuse to go down without a fight. With trembling hands, I fumble for the door handle, my heart pounding in my ears like a war drum. The van jerks into motion, sending me stumbling to the floor. I hear muffled voices, harsh and guttural, coming from the front of the van. My mind races, trying to make sense of what's happening, trying to find a way out of this nightmare. As the van lurches around a corner, I feel a glimmer of hope. The door isn't locked. With a surge of determination, I throw it open, the cold night air rushing in to greet me. The man curses behind me, but I don't look back. I stumble out onto the street, my legs weak and wobbly. The van screeches to a halt, and I hear the sound of footsteps approaching. I run, fueled by pure instinct and fear, not daring to glance over my shoulder. I don't stop until I reach the safety of my own doorstep, my lungs burning and my chest heaving. I burst through the door, tears streaming down my face. My mother is there, her eyes wide with alarm as she takes in my disheveled appearance. I blurt out the story, the words tumbling out in a frantic rush. She hugs me tightly, her arms a comforting anchor in the storm of my emotions. She calls the police, her voice steady and determined. The authorities arrive swiftly, their presence a reassuring presence in the midst of chaos. They listen intently to my account, their expressions grave and focused. Together we set out in search of the van, a beacon of hope in the darkness that threatens to engulf us. After a harrowing search, the van is found abandoned in a secluded alley. Traces of foul play are evident, the grim reality of what could have been chilling to the bone. Through diligent investigation, the culprits are apprehended, their faces twisted with malice and hatred. As I watch them being led away in handcuffs, a sense of justice and closure washes over me. The nightmare is over, the shadows dispelled by the light of truth and justice. I breathe a sigh of relief, knowing that I've emerged from the darkness stronger and more resilient than ever before. As I stand under the cold glare of the streetlights, I realize that the night is no longer a thing to be feared. It is a realm of endless possibilities, a canvas upon which the light of courage and perseverance can paint a brighter future. And as I walk home after dark, I know that I carry with me the strength to face whatever terrors may come, armed with the knowledge that the light will always triumph over the shadows. As I stepped out of the crowded bar onto the dimly lit street, I felt a shiver run down my spine. It was well past midnight, and the air was thick with an eerie stillness. The few streetlights along the deserted road flickered ominously, casting long, stretching shadows that seemed to dance in the darkness. I pulled my jacket tighter around me, trying to shake off the sense of foreboding creeping up my back. I lived just a few blocks away, and normally the walk home was uneventful. But tonight was different. Tonight, I felt like I was being watched, like unseen eyes were tracking my every move. I quickened my pace, the sound of my footsteps echoing in the empty street like a haunting drumbeat. As I passed by the old abandoned factory, the one that everyone said was haunted, a cold gust of wind whipped through the alleyway, sending a chill through me. My heart pounded in my chest, and I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. I hesitated for a moment, wondering if I should take a different route home, but the fear of the unknown held me back. I pressed on, my eyes darting nervously from side to side, searching the shadows for any sign of movement. The street seemed to stretch on endlessly, the buildings looming overhead like silent sentinels watching my every move. Every creak of a floorboard, every rustle of a bush, sent a jolt of fear through me, making my pulse race. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the darkness, stepping into the dim circle of light cast by a flickering street lamp. My breath caught in my throat as I saw the silhouette of a man, tall and menacing, his features obscured by the shadows. I could feel the hairs on my arms rise as a wave of primal fear washed over me. I tried to keep my composure, to convince myself that it was just a passerby, but something about the way he stood there, unmoving, sent a shiver down my spine. I quickened my pace, my heart pounding in my chest, the echoes of my footsteps bouncing off the walls like a haunting refrain. I could feel the man's eyes on me, boring into my soul with a cold intensity that made my skin crawl. I dared not look back, not wanting to confirm my worst fears. I just kept walking, each step faster than the last, the echo of his footfalls echoing in my ears like a sinister drumbeat. But no matter how fast I walked, it felt like he was right behind me, his presence looming like a dark shadow over my shoulder. I could hear his breathing now, heavy and labored, the sound of it sending a chill down my spine. I felt like a prey being stalked by a silent predator, my every move being watched and analyzed. I finally reached the end of the street, the lights of my apartment building casting a warm glow in the darkness. I fumbled with my keys, my hands shaking uncontrollably as I tried to unlock the door. The sound of footsteps behind me grew louder, closer, and I knew without looking that the man was right there, watching, waiting. With a final desperate twist of the key, I pushed open the door and stumbled inside, slamming it shut behind me with a gasp of relief. I leaned against the door, my heart still racing, my breath coming in quick, shallow gasps. I had made it home, safe and sound, but the memory of those shadowed eyes would haunt me for nights to come. As I locked the door and turned off the lights, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that unseen eyes were still peering in through the darkness, waiting for another chance to strike. And as I lay in bed, the echoes of that chilling walk home after dark still lingering in my mind, I knew that some fears never truly fade away. It was a chilly autumn evening, the kind that makes you want to curl up in a warm blanket with a cup of hot cocoa. But I had to walk home from the library, a journey that usually took me about 20 minutes. I zipped up my jacket, pulled my hood over my head, and set off into the night. The streets were mostly empty, save for the occasional car passing by. The only sounds were the crunching of leaves beneath my feet and the distant hum of traffic. I quickened my pace, eager to get home and out of the cold. As I turned onto my street, I noticed a figure standing at the end of the block. It was a tall, thin man dressed in a long, dark coat. He was facing away from me, staring at the houses across the street. I hesitated for a moment, then continued walking, trying to ignore the uneasy feeling in my gut. As I got closer, I could see that the man was holding something in his hand, a small black object that looked like a gun. My heart began to race, and I considered turning back and running in the opposite direction. But I was too close to the man now, and I didn't want to draw attention to myself. I decided to keep walking, trying to maintain a casual pace. As I passed the man, I glanced at him out of the corner of my eye. He didn't seem to notice me, and I breathed a sigh of relief. But as I walked away, I heard the sound of footsteps behind me. I turned around, and there he was, the tall, thin man walking in my direction. He was still holding the small black object in his hand, and he was staring at me with cold, emotionless eyes. I quickened my pace, but the man matched my stride. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins, and I knew I had to do something. I fumbled in my pocket for my phone, but I realized I had left it at home. I was completely alone with no way to call for help. The man was getting closer, and I could see the determination in his eyes. I knew I had to act fast. I darted into a nearby alley, hoping to lose him in the maze of backyards and fences. I ran as fast as I could, my heart pounding in my chest. I could hear the man's footsteps behind me, growing louder with each passing second. I turned a corner and found myself in a dead end, with no way out. I turned around, ready to face the man and whatever fate awaited me. But to my surprise, he was gone. I looked around, but there was no sign of him. I was alone in the alley, with nothing but the sound of my own breathing to keep me company. I made my way back to the street, still shaken by the encounter. I walked the rest of the way home, constantly looking over my shoulder, expecting the man to appear at any moment. When I finally reached my front door, I was trembling with fear and exhaustion. I fumbled with my keys, my hands shaking so badly that I could barely fit the key into the lock. As I stepped inside, I locked the door behind me and leaned against it, trying to catch my breath. I couldn't shake the feeling that the man was still out there, waiting for me. I went to bed that night, but I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the man and the small black object he was holding. I wondered if I had imagined the whole thing, or if it had been a cruel trick of the mind. In the days that followed, I tried to put the incident behind me. I told myself that it was just a random encounter and that I was safe now. But every time I walked home after dark, I couldn't help but look over my shoulder, wondering if the tall, thin man was still out there waiting for me. And even now, years later, I still feel a shiver run down my spine whenever I think about that long walk home. I've never forgotten the fear I felt that night, or the feeling of being completely alone in the darkness. It's a memory that will stay with me forever, a reminder of the dangers that lurk in the shadows, waiting for their next victim.